And we're live. There we go. Welcome, everybody. Hi, my name's Claire Kennedy, and I am the founder and what am I? I'm the founder and the Chief Executive Officer of Kennedy Street CI charity. Hi, welcome to our recovery talks and Happy New Year. It's our first talk back in the new year. And I'm here today with the gorgeous Kerrie Higham from the Well Communities, who's a lovely friend of ours, and obviously my handsome husband, Kevin Kennedy. What I'm going to do is I'm just going to explain for those of you who don't know what we do, and then Kev is going to give you a little bit of an overview of who he is, just in case you don't know who he is. And then he'll introduce the gorgeous Kerrie and she'll tell you a bit more about herself. So Kennedy Street is a peer-led charity, which is recovery focused. And we're based in Brighton, and we offer support and signposting to anyone who's interested in recovery. And what's happened, thanks to COVID, is we've been operating a national recovery helpline where people ring up who are struggling with any addiction. And what we do is we've got trained peer operators on the end of the helpline who just offer some support and some signposting as to what is available in your area. So if you're ringing from Manchester, we've got loads and loads of lists of great resources that are freely available, and also lists of private rehabs as well, because a lot of people have wanted to go into private rehabs or private practitioners. So this is what's emerged because of the pandemic, is we've got lists and lists of amazing referrals, really. And Kerrie's one of our friends who's doing an amazing job in the Cumbria area. I'm not going to tell you too much, so she can tell you a little bit more. So if you want any help, or you don't know where to start, or you just want to have start a conversation about recovery, you can always give us a ring and we'll connect you with what's available in your area and just offer you some additional remote support. So on that note, I'm going to hand over to my handsome husband, who will introduce himself.
Hello, everyone. My name's Kevin Kennedy. I am the patron and very, very handsome poster boy for Kennedy Street. Happy New Year to you. Welcome to Lockdown 3, which is probably the worst sequel ever. And it's going to be okay, it's going to be all right. I truly believe it's going to be okay. We've got to get through this bit. We've got to get these vaccines out. And I think, the government now are totally on board with that and realise they've got to do that within the next six to 8 weeks. And I honestly believe we can see the light at the end of the tunnel. So if you're feeling a bit down today, hold on to that thought, because I really think we're going to be okay. Today, we're going to be speaking to the lovely Kerrie from the Well Communities. She's a director, service manager of Well Communities up there in God's own county, Lanacshire, of which I have an affinity with, obviously. And she is going to tell us all about the Well Communities and the brilliant work they're doing up there. We have spoken before. So, ladies and gentlemen, would you please put your hands together for the lovely Kerrie Higham. Thank you.
Oh, thank you so much for that introduction, Kev. It's really kind of you, and just thank you both for inviting me here. Happy New Year, everybody. And, as Kev's just said, Lockdown 3, worst sequel ever. I think personally, I'm just trying to keep it in the day. Can't even think about tomorrow, just try and get through the day on pretty much everything, whatever's going on. So I'm always really nervous the first 5 minutes. And as I'm introducing the Well in the first 5 minutes, I am going to have to refer to my notes, because whilst I've worked, in this organisation from its very start, and helped build it up, I have a tendency to forget the things that are important and really rabbit on. So in order to really do, our organisation justice and the wonderful people who work for us and the community members who come to us, and obviously in the spirit of this talk, it's all about giving you guys information and letting people know what's out there. I'm just going to run through a little list of who we are and what we do. Okay, so as Kevin's already introduced, I'm Kerrie Higham. I'm the Director and Service Manager of Alero. So Alero basically means we are a lived experience recovery organisation. So in more plain speak, that essentially means that everybody who works for us has lived experience of mental health, drug and alcohol addiction, and of offending. Now, maybe in some organisations that can be commonplace, but we kind of wear that as a badge of pride and a badge of honour, and that kind of forms the way that we lead. And the way that we engage with people. I think what is important to say is that we are professionals with lived experience. I think sometimes I think not so much now, but I think in the past, the view of lived experience organisations can basically be a bunch of junkies having a go. And I think that's, I think in some respects, when you kind of start off, there's an idea, there's a rookie element, but we are very much, a bunch of professionals who use our lived experience as a way of kind of providing a better service for people. So I too have lived experience. I'm 14 years abstinent from heroin and alcohol. That's, been no mean feat. But here I am 14 years on, living to tell the tale. So we're a vibrant community of people who support each other and believe wholeheartedly that recovery is possible for everyone. So, we're big on valuing and investing in people who use our services, and what we're able to show is a different side to addiction. I mean, my kind of first entry into services and into treatment was, really, really difficult. There was a huge stigma attached. There wasn't really any visible recovery. So where I live, I actually live in Heysham now, but did most of my addiction in Lancaster down the road, and people either died or they moved. So you never really saw those people in and around town who'd actually cracked addiction, who were living, really fulfilling lives. So I think it's really important. It's been important for me to stay living where my addiction took place, because then I can be that visible member in my community. And it is very, very impactful. It really does work. So we have loads of expertise to support people with a variety of problems. So again, the offending, the mental health, homelessness and childhood abuse. So our services are free and people can use them for as long as they want. And that's what makes us different to other support providers. So there's no end point, there's no ticker box. We've done that. We've done that for you. It's time to move on, because we're all about community. And what we find is once people come into the community, they stay. So the NHS actually in hospitals, in A&E, we work with the police and we work with prisons, and we offer support through a variety of means. So we have supported housing, we have day hab, we do lots of psychosocial interventions, we run community hubs, we do recovery work in prisons and help through the gate support. As mentioned, so we work in A&E, so the Royal Lancaster Infirmary. And if you come to A&E, obviously they're going to patch you up. But if what sits behind your injury or your presentation at A&E is a dual diagnosis, if there's dual diagnosis that sits behind it, so a lot of people, dual diagnosed alcoholics and drug addicts, can use A&E, for the right reasons, in terms of they do need medical support, but what they really need is community, social support, and that lived experience kind of input, you see. So our staff are there in A&E most days, kind of waiting for that referral. So we can keep people away from hospitals and get the community support that they need. We also do mutual aid facilitation, and we do a lot of community activity projects. So we're right at the heart of the community in North Lancashire and in Cumbria and in Liverpool. So I will just say we did start off as just a social club in Lancaster. So my husband David, who's our CEO and founder of the organisation, he'd had a long time in prison as drug addict as well, and he just kept going back to prison, coming out using, going back using. And his last stint was actually in Lancaster Castle, and there was a real vibrant recovery community, created in Lancaster Castle. And what David recognised when he was in there was there were so many guys coming back to prison who were adamant they weren't coming back. We're not coming back, we won't coming back, you won't see me again, you won't see me again. And then, all the while he's in there, it's like these men who, appeared really strong and appeared to have it all going on, they just kept winding back in prison. So David actually relocated to Lancaster, so he's a Scouser, didn't want to go back to Liverpool, so chose Lancaster as his home. And I think what he realised was the impact of the lack of support. So there wasn't anything. I mean, going back like 14 years ago, services weren't even touting mutual aid. I think a lot of statutory services were kind of run by the NHS. So it's very much a medical model. It's like if you went with a drug addiction, you kind of got more drugs. Alcohol was kind of detox again through medication, but there was no thinking that there might be a solution in the community. So you were always going to services. And I remember being there and no one ever telling me about NA or AA or that there may ever be another way. And I think David's experience of coming out of prison was there isn't anything for anybody. And at the time in Lancaster, there were only 2 NA meetings a week. So there was no fellowship. 14 years ago in this area, there was no concept of fellowship. When I first started going, I was the only woman sat in a meeting of 6 men. So I wasn't able to make those friendships, make the relationships. I could ring people if there was a problem, but recovery isn't just about ringing people if there's a problem. Fellowship is about friendship. It's about support. It's about being in each other's houses and kind of getting to know each other. So David always had this idea that he needed to create something, there needed to be something. So he kind of started his journey working in treatment services across North and Central Lancashire. And started realising gaps in services as well. So not only a gap in the prison system, but there were huge gaps in services, namely the 9 to 5, Monday to Friday. Addiction don't function like that. The majority of drug addicts are not getting up till tea time. It's like it just kind of doesn't function in that time. And then there was also, weekend support, out of hours support, but also therapeutic relationships, actually a space to build up therapeutic relationships, which really saw that was lacking. So he came up with the idea of just having a social club. Let's just open a social club. Let's open it on a Saturday and let's just see if we can, really just try and build something. So the main aim was for people coming out of prison, people leaving services and the wider recovering community. Because I think what's important is, and I think it's going back to what I said before, you either died or you moved. I never saw anyone get clean. I never saw anyone get out of the hole that I was in. And recovery is infectious and recovery breeds recovery. So kind of what he hoped to create was a place where people in recovery would want to come as well. To really be that example, and help people. And I think another big thing that we are focusing is families. So we have lots of people who, when they're coming into recovery, they've got really broken relationships with the families. The relationships with the children are non-existent. People can struggle to interact with the children. There's been no real meaningful activity. They've just been kind of like functioning relationships. So what we wanted to do was provide a space so people could actually learn to have relationship with the children and families. So we just rented a community centre on Dallas Road in Lancaster, and we opened on a Saturday afternoon from 12 till 4. Now, pre-COVID, that was still open, and we needed 40 quid for the rent. So we needed to make 40 quid a week. So what we used to do is charge people £2.50 to come in, and they could have free tea and coffee. But initially, of those 15 people that came in, 9 were volunteers. The volunteers used to pay £2.50 to come to work because everyone believed in it. I think after a little while, we did start to get some funding, and then I think about 18 months in, David and I left our jobs. So David was a recovery lead for an organisation called User Voice. So we kind of done this alongside. And I was, what was I doing? Was I at uni? Yeah, I think I could have been at uni then. So we just decided that, right, we're going to, see what we can do. So that was 8 years ago. Was it 8 years ago? 8 years ago. Yeah. So in 8 years, as is what has just been mentioned with all the things that we do, we've just really steadily built up. And I believe that's because there is a need, there is a need for people like us, to wear our addiction with pride. I think, when you've done a lot of kind of work on yourself and, it's a real gift, it's a real gift to give to others. All I ever wanted to hear was, it's all right. and to have a relationship where I didn't have to lie. Every relationship, whether it had been with a doctor, a key worker, my mum, it was all hinged on untruths, because I could never find someone who I could tell the truth to, but could accept the truth and could accept me as I am. And I think because we have a team of people who are all in recovery, who have got the just really, really passionate, willing people. And I think because there is a need, that's why we are where we are today. So have I gone on for it?
Oh, it's absolutely fabulous. I could listen to you all day, to be honest. And I can say it first-hand experience. I've been to your project in Barrow, and Kerrie kindly showed me around, and the team were amazing. And oh my goodness, honestly, I was dreaming about it afterwards. It was just so inspirational. Can you tell us a little bit about that project in Barrow? Because I think how it looks and how it works, I personally think is the future. And it's very socially innovative.
Yeah.
So can you tell us a little bit more about that project?
Yeah, okay. So for us, rehab, and this is not really to do rehabs down, but rehab is very much underpinned by a house on a hill concept, removed from society, in a bubble, with a group of people you're probably never likely to see again or even live next door to, or, granted, you will keep relationships, and then you will have to come home from that and integrate back into society. So what we do with our housing, we've got 28 beds in Barrow. So it's very much based, it's supported housing, 24-hour supported housing, and it's very much based on a community recovery model. So we have people living in houses dotted around Barrow, so 4 to a house. And then what that enables people to do is recover in their own community. So they have to walk past the off licenses, they have to walk past the people, who they've done the using with. They get to maintain relationships with family. And then what we do is we run a day hub that runs alongside. So our day hub is support groups that run all day. Now we do have a support package in place from 7 o'clock in the morning until 9 o'clock at night. So a lot of the support that we offer is 12-step support, but we do have other support that takes place kind of in between times. And then we do the mutual facilitation of an evening. The guys who are in our houses have got gym passes, they've got access to volunteering, loads of opportunities. And also as well, we opened, because you saw the supermarket, didn't you? So we actually opened a couple of years ago called Well Fed. We opened a social supermarket. So people who kind of come through the housing get the opportunity to get employment in the supermarket as well. So I just think it's different in the sense that we're very much place-based. So 70% of those in our housing are actually from Barrow. So you are building up that visible recovery in the community. And, when people see, you kind of like your worst faces and they're doing all right, it is really, really impactful. And one of the good things is we're on the high street. So, we're there, we're loud and proud, we're very, very visible. I think there's a pub across the road from us and there's a pub right next door to us, but it's very, very clear and explicit what we do. And I think our impact that we actually have on that community, it is great. So.
Yeah, it is. It's absolutely phenomenal. And if anybody's, wondering, or if you live in Barrow and you want to go and see it in action, obviously it'll all be. Is it closed down for the moment, Kerrie?
No, I mean the shop's still open, and what we've done, we've got staff working in bubbles, and I mean we don't usually with the day hub structure, and this is what you saw, Claire. We would have because above the supermarket, we've got our office and we've got our group rooms. So pre-COVID, all of the community would get together in the daytime and they would come and do the group work. And the good thing about this is a lot of people can't kind of go to rehab or go to a supported housing facility because they can't leave the jobs, they can't leave the families. I mean, a lot of women, don't have the same privilege as what men have as being able to go away. So by us offering a day hub structure, you can be a resident of Barrow and surrounding areas and you can come and get involved every day in what we're doing, but go home at the end of the day, you see. So, yeah.
Yeah, I love that about what you did. And it almost made recovery viable especially for mums with kids as well, with childcare needs and family needs, because like I say, you can't just abandon the family if you've got to go home and look after them as well. So if there's anybody in that Brandon area that's interested, go and have a look. Go to the Well Summit supermarket. It's a fabulous supermarket. It's just a great setup. I find you really inspirational, and I love what you do. And you were all so kind and so hospitable and really passionate and giddy about showing me around and showing me the impact that it has on people's lives, because it does. It's life changing, isn't it?
It is, and I still think for us as well. I mean, we didn't start off. Our only dream was to help people. Our only goal was to help people. There was no kind of cross-county thinking, or we never thought, we just never thought really that any of it could happen. So when we get the opportunity to actually show people what's going on, sometimes you're a bit like, I can't believe this is going on. How has this happened? And because I mean, probably one thing you'll realise, or you'll come to realise, Claire, is when you're working in an organisation, sometimes you can be so involved in the details and making sure everything runs okay and people are doing what they should be doing, and all your I's are kind of dotted and your T's are crossed. And I think showing people like yourself around and other people, and even talking like this, it's really good for me to connect with all that stuff. So I get to lift my head out of policies, procedures, staffing, all the things that kind of comes with running an organisation. So yeah, it's great, and we do remain really grateful for what we've done.
And it does. It reminds you, doesn't it? It reminds you, actually, great work that you've done, the great work that you're doing, and the great work that's coming out of it as well. So it is like a ripple effect, isn't it? You see some of the amazing people that have come through your project, who are going on to, fulfill their lives and thrive as well.
Well, I think at last count, I mean, we have a staff team of 25, and 9 of those have come through our project. Okay, so yeah.
And that's great. I'm gonna ask Kev if he's got any questions, because I could just ask you loads of questions and tell you loads of amazing things, but I'm going to let Kev ask some questions.
Well, yeah, I'm happy to get a word in edgeways, really, between you two. That was a really inspiring story, that, Kerrie. I mean, I really like the way that, you yourself and your husband suddenly decided, right, let's give up what we're doing and see if we can make a difference, which is so admirable. That's amazing. And that the people with the lived experience are all professionals, which I think is important, because people have still got that idea that alcoholics, drug addicts are people you see out, fortunately living on the streets, that's just the tip of the iceberg, really. But people still sort of cling to that. Maybe it makes them feel better, I don't know. But it's there's professional people out there who have drug and alcohol problems. And I wanted to ask you, the pandemic has this really affected what you've been trying to do, or have you found, like we have, that there's actually it's a double-edged sword? Some of the stuff that we're able to do, because it's all online now, is probably better than what we had before. And can you talk me through the process if someone rings you up from Lancashire and says, look, I need some help now? Could you talk me through that as well, please?
Yeah. So I think, as the pandemic affected, no, it's not affected at all. I think when the pandemic very first started, we obviously we called a board meeting right away, and one thing that we decided was one of our essential services would remain as relationship with the community. Because that's ultimately what we're built on. And I think some organisations really narrowed it down to the bare bones, but we narrowed it down to what was really in line with who we are, our ethos, and also realising that, oh my God, imagine being a heroin addict in this. Imagine being an alcoholic in this. What would we need? What is it that we should be doing? So I think the first couple of months, I mean, especially working from home as well, and we have the kids from home, we've got a 6 and 9 year old. And then we took 7 years to build the well, and we almost had a matter of weeks to create an entire online service. And I'm pleased to say we did it, and we did it exceptionally well, because again, being a Leo, we've got an entire team of people saying what we're going to do. We had an entire team of people saying, I'm not working from home. How can you make sure that I can come to work? How can you make sure that I can still get to people and do the job that I need to do? So we were quite lucky then. We didn't have anyone with suspected symptoms. We've not had anyone who's actually had, COVID. It's been, we've been lucky in that sense. But I think mentally we've stayed very, very strong, and we've stayed very, very focused. And I think that's enabled our success in lockdown. So I think, we just started replicating, so everything that we did face to face. I think the first thing that we did was created hubs. So hubs, community spaces where people can come with their families, come by themselves, whatever. They're just really relaxed spaces for kind of like fun, games and connection. And then after a little while, I mean, there was a couple of groups, a couple of our PSIs that we put online, because they had, psychosocial intervention groups that we put online, because those groups were in existence and they were physical, and it was really important that those people felt supported. They got to stay in the peer group, and they still got to progress in the ways that they would had we been doing face to face. And then what we came to realise is the hubs were great, but people wanted more action. People wanted more focus, because I think the weight of the lockdown was starting to get to them. So we actually reduced down to 2 virtual hubs. And then we actually found we increased our groups. So we then had an alcohol support group. We had an eating disorder support group. I'm not going to do us justice here and now support group, recovery support, and abstinence support. And this is kind of like what came out of it. And people kind of felt a lot more settled, really, and like they were doing more for the recovery. In the Barrow project, so obviously we had to work out distancing, because we've got guys in different houses, and we're going to work out households. We assigned staff 2 bubbles. We had to kit them all out with laptops and everything, and a lot of their recovery was done online. But I think the good thing is they got to stay in the teams, they got to stay in the bubbles, and we were still able to take people into the housing, after testing and kind of, doing risk assessments and stuff. And I think one of the positive things that came out of it is we would have people who would just use every excuse under the sun why they couldn't come to a group. And I think pre-COVID, if people didn't make the effort to come and see us, we was almost like, well, then what do you want from us? Because this is our offer. And I think with the pandemic, we was then forced to widen our offer. And then invariably what that did was met the need of socially anxious people, for those people who really didn't want to come out of the house, who really couldn't get out of their house, who really didn't like big groups. And I think you'll know yourself with the Zooms, people have the option to be anonymous, they can have cameras off, they can be however they're feeling. And we never really saw that previously there was a problem with what we were doing. But now the online platform's in place, it's almost like it's corrected a problem, that we didn't really know existed. I think our membership has increased, it's doubled. I mean, the amount of Facebook requests we get, like friend request, group member requests, it's increased by over 1,000, Twitter followers, our website requests, where people want help, probably about 20 a week, probably 20 more phone calls a week. We were able to meet that need. So I think going to the next part is, if people ring us, what do we do? Or is that what you've asked me? Because my head's gone a little bit now. Yeah. Okay. So, I mean, the number that's kind of coming along the bottom, there's loads of ways of contacting us. So we've got the website there where there will be a request form. And that website is run by our lovely admin, Jo, Claire, who you've met, who did the sisterhood things with us. So if you do a request through Facebook or a request through Twitter, that would be David, our CEO. So he runs those 2 groups. Or the phone number that's running along the bottom. Just ring us up. I mean, what we would do is we would find out what it is that you want, what you think what you think you're struggling with, what is the immediate need. We've got a space for you if you want to stop but you're not ready to stop. There are groups we can put you in. If you're abstinent, you want to stay abstinent, there's groups that we can put you in. If you're looking for some mutual aid facilitation, we've got the majority of the staff team kind of go to meetings, really vibrant in the recovering community. If you needed help with your family, I mean, you may actually be a family member who's watching this going, do you know what, I'm absolutely sick of my son, or I'm sick of my daughter, I'm at my wit's end, I don't know what to do. We've got family groups as well. So I think anything kind of pertaining to addiction, alcoholism, mental health, no matter where you're at in that process, if you just contact us via any of those ways, we would just have like an inquiry conversation with you, and it's just to say you're welcome. You will speak to someone who is in recovery, you will speak to someone who has been through the exact same experience what you're going through. There will be no judgment, and if we couldn't help you, we're really connected with a lot of third sectors and partners. If your need was more clinical, if you needed more kind of intense support than we could give you, we would absolutely facilitate that pathway into another service. So all I would say is give us a ring and come to us, and let's see what we can do.
That's great, thank you. Claire, do you want me to get you a drink of water? Sorry.
No, it's okay. I've stopped coughing now.
Okay.
I appreciate it.
You was going redder and redder, so I just thought, oh, better. Well, that's great. I was interested as well in these sober houses. So you said 4 to a house. Is there someone there to mediate? Is somebody in charge there, and how secure are they? And the day centres. So presumably, correct me if I'm wrong, you live in the house, and the day centre is physically, geographically somewhere else.
Yeah.
And they go to those and then come back to the house. Is that right?
Yeah, that's right. Yeah. So our kind of day hub is right in the middle of Barrow Town Centre. So the houses are kind of dotted around that. But when you come to the housing, so we take people who are drug and alcohol free. So we can't support detox. So invariably people have detox when they've come to us, or they've kind of come off the medications, by the time they get to us. So we have 3 stages. So first stages, people are usually probably up to 3 or 4 months. So up to 3 or 4 months in the recovery. Just say we have a women's house. So 4 of those 28 beds is a women's house. So as you'll know yourself with recovery, women stick with women early doors, and the men stick with the men. So yeah, these houses are staffed. But then when people kind of get through to second stage, they will be looking at taking on some peer supporting responsibility, like a community. So some of the peers within that community may then have some responsibility of getting the first stages to doctors and dentists and all those, because as a first stager, you wouldn't really be doing anything by yourself. Second stage, there's a bit more responsibility and a little bit more trust. So it's always the community. I mean, this is all overseen by staff, and it is staffed 24/7. But what we like to do is create responsible members in the community, you see. And I think what you find is when everyone's doing the stuff, the community regulates itself, because people are so, the recovery is so hard won that they don't tolerate people messing about. They don't tolerate bullshit. They don't tolerate trouble causes. The community will expose anyone who's relapsed, anyone who's kind of not behaving in a really good way. They will expose people who they don't think they're applying themselves properly, to the therapeutic work that they should be doing. So we just kind of, obviously, we're accountable for all that, but that's the kind of ethos that we try and create within communities.
And what kind of program do you follow? Is it total abstinence, or is it semi-abstinence, or how does that work?
Well, the only thing as a staff team that we know how to do, we never learned how to drink and take drugs successfully, so we would never try and teach other people how to do that. So we're a program of total abstinence, and for we use a 12-step program.
Sorry, I was going to say, so would you help? I mean, I think it's great. I think, for me, that's how recovery works. I've never, ever been in a situation in the community, in the recovering community, where people will blow smoke up your bum. It's like if you're behaving like an umpty, people will call you out on it. So I think it's great that your communities, and it's critical. We're not talking about, a bit of a tickly throat here. We're talking about a life-threatening condition that people can die from, so it is essential that they are held accountable. I think that's absolutely fabulous. I've completely lost track of what the other thing that I was going to say now. There's so many things that come up when you're talking. I'm scribbling them down, trying to remember what it is that I want to ask you. It's gone. Go on, Kev. You've got loads of questions.
Pass that ball over. Well, yeah. Well, what I would like to ask, I think, is once you've gone through that, once they've made contact with you, what would be the next step? Say they were still using or still drinking. Would you signpost them to places, or would you take care of them 100%, or how would it go from there?
Okay, so if anyone come to us and they express an interest to go in our housing facility, we would assess them, and then part of that assessment process may be start attending the groups where it's okay that you can still be doing what you're doing because you're working towards abstinence to come into the house. So that's what we would do. It's just calling where people are at. I mean, not everyone is going to want to come to our housing, but what we do have is a group that meets a need, no matter where people are at.
And if I was a working professional with an addiction problem, what is your confidentiality sort of ideas? Because I don't want my employers to know that I'm coming to see you and going to your various help points.
Well, I mean, it's anonymous. I mean, the only place, obviously where safeguarding, poses a risk, or, you pose a risk to yourself or others, which is very, very few and far between. But they're the only occasions that we really do need to speak about, which wouldn't necessarily be your employer anyway. It could be adult social care. I think we have had some quite high-profile people come and use our housing facility and access our support groups, and we've managed that exceptionally well. Right.
And if I could hold down my job at the same time as doing the treatment, is there a facility for that? Could I do that?
I suppose it would depend on what job it is that you were doing, and
we'll just say it was a 9-to-5 job. Where could I fit in my treatment around that 9 to 5?
Okay, so I think the housing wouldn't be an option if you needed to go to work. But I think we've got lots of out of hours support groups, you see. So we would, if you came to us, we would find something on an evening and a weekend that you could work around. You could work your recovery around.
Brilliant.
Yeah. I think that's great, though. I think, with any recovery process, I think it's important that there is a period of investment from the individual. And I think sometimes, from doing the work that we do in the community, I always say to people, give yourself at least a month of just immersing yourself into this stuff. It has to be all or nothing. So, speak to your employers, talk to them about, you getting well, or however you want to word it to them, but commit to investing in your well-being and getting well first, because I think it's a foundational block, isn't it, really, that initial investment.
And I think a lot of people would be surprised actually what their company's relapse policy is. I think a lot of, especially in this day and age, a lot of companies have really good drug and alcohol policies and well-being policies, and I think you'd be really surprised at the support options.
And how much would it cost me? How much would it cost? Would it cost me, or how much would it cost me personally, or my company, or whoever, or is it a free service?
So it's free service. So if you came to our housing, it would cost you, if you was a resident, it probably cost you somewhere near £250 a week. So it's about £1,000 a month. And if you just accessed our groups, it will be completely free. So it's the housing element that costs the money. But the group community support doesn't cost you anything.
And is there a way to get that £250? Is if I can't afford that, could I get that from the government? Could I get that from the council? Could I get that from charity? How does that work?
Yeah, you would get it from the council. So you would apply for high rate housing benefit. So high rate housing benefit pays for that. So rarely have people not been able to come in due to a lack of funds.
Yeah, that was exactly the question I was going to ask. Is it so if people are unemployed or they're on housing benefits or whatever benefits they're on, there are ways around it. So
yeah, and I think one of the important things for us is it's self-referral. So quite often, with rehabs, you've got to have a key worker from a statutory organisation that's got to refer you. If you've already had a couple before, chances are you're not going to get funded for it again because they may have spent grands on you going and you've failed. We just take self-referrals. It's got absolutely no other organisational involvement, and we've got people who've been back 2 or 3 times because it's just not worked the first time. So again, there's no time limit, because of the nature of the funding and because of the nature of how we work. Because I don't think you can. I think some of the things in which you might realise yourself, Claire, soon is like funding. There's always outcomes, and I can understand there needs to be outcomes because there's public money. But if you understand drug and alcohol addiction, some people try 5, 6, 7, 8 times to get clean. Some people do it first time.
Yeah.
But that's not the experience of lots of people. So because we know that's not the experience of the majority, we then don't have any time limit or a set amount of times or when we'll stop working with you because we understand the nature of addiction and alcoholism.
Yeah, I think it's so important as well that people feel cared for and able to come back. That's how recovery works, isn't it? That's how the fellowships work. It's a safe place where we can go, no matter what happens, if you relapse or if you're struggling with life. It's like you said, the more you progress in recovery, the more you realise that actually, for me, I'm talking on a personal perspective really, is the more I realise that actually drinking and drug taking were a solution to my problem. My problem was actually a living problem. I didn't know how to do life without an anaesthetic. So what my recovery is really is it's about me staying well, staying connected, staying healthy, and sort of getting out of my own head, because this is where the danger lies. And it doesn't matter how sober, how long ago it was that you had a drink or a drug. I think there's still an element of processing that we have to go through, and that's supported sort of nurturing. I've got friends that don't judge me when I have a rant and a rave, and they might say, oh, have you thought about looking at yourself, Claire, rather than blaming Kev for something? No. Don't need to tell me that. Thank you very much.
Yeah.
It's great though. It's a life solution, isn't it? So really, when I look at drinking and drug taking, that's like 5% of the problem. The 95% of the problem, which I think you do fabulously at the Well Communities, is help people understand the life solution that they need to engage in, and that you're part of it too. You're so interwoven with everything that's going on. And I love the fact that you also get them work ready as well. Be that working in your service, or be that, giving them an introduction to those bridges to normal living.
Because as a veteran of a few rehabs, what I found personally was I did a couple where there was no education to get a knowledge of my problems, and other places I went to really concentrated on that, which I personally found a great help. So if I, do you concentrate on education of my drug of choice, and after I've hopefully put down my drug of choice and been in this housing, what kind of aftercare do you offer? Because I don't want to be thrown out there again unprepared. So how does that work?
Okay, so I think a lot of the education really comes from the kind of lived experience angle. So I can't say that there would be education per se about what you've taken, but very much about the consequences and where it's led to. And I think again, this comes from having your Lero staff team and people kind of really still staying involved. So I think using the 12 steps, I think people get a really, really thorough look at themselves. But also what we do is we have counselling that runs alongside that. So just going back to what Claire was saying before, drugs and alcohol were part of really the life problem. I also think as well that as someone in recovery, we probably all have a duty to go someplace with counselling as well, because, I mean, me personally, I wanted to know why, why was I this way? That was important. And I know the fellowship would never really tell me why, it didn't matter why, you just are, and this is how it is. But, a bit like yourself, Kev, education wise, it's like I needed to know. So counselling is a massive element for me, the traumatic experiences, what that could have potentially started, what obsessions, what behaviours it started, because I think the addiction was just, a follow on from all that. So when you get into second stage, so when you've looked at your addiction, basically your powerlessness and your unmanageability and the rampage that you've created on your own life, and it's as a result of your addiction, what comes in stage 2 then is counselling as well. So that's, kind of further education on why we are where we are, because I think if you just stay stuck in 12-step and you think all your problems are in relation to drugs and alcohol, that's doing people a disservice as well. So yeah. I think there is an education outside of that, so kind of life education. So again, when you get into stage 2, there will be training courses that you will start to do. There'll be, kind of learning how to be a peer mentor, the companion training, that kind of stuff. So there is a focus on education, but not so much in we're going to talk about this drug and we're going to talk about what's what. It's more of a bigger picture education. And I forgot the next question.
No, I'm the same as you. I'm listening and I'm going, oh gosh, yeah. And it's critical. I think it's, for me anyway, it's critical that it goes in that order, or it was critical that it went in that order, because for me, obviously I had to address the primary problem. Yeah. And for me, it was drink and drugs. Yeah. And to be honest, Kerrie, now knowing what I know, I can look back in retrospect and see that actually I had to be sort of starting to get well before I could actually engage in that second stage of having counselling and having that support, because it isn't easy sometimes, dealing with childhood trauma, dealing with some of the stuff that's traumatized us in active addiction. Being in active addiction is traumatic in itself, and the situations that we get ourselves into. So I think there's an element, I don't think I would have ever, I think I always used to try and do it the other way around. When I was in active addiction, I thought if I get some counselling or I get some help, then I'll be okay. But I still had the problem on top of it. So I was never going to get well, because I had to address the first things first, really. And I think, you're really inspirational to me, because you're a perfect example. I'm sure you wouldn't. You'd agree. Obviously, you've got an amazing mind, and I think what I see in you, and I don't know you that well, but what I do know of you is this amazing mind that you've got. That you never really realised that you had until you started to get well. And I see that a lot in people. The hope for the future. I meet people, and they're very preoccupied with the addiction and very focused on the problem. And often I say to them, I want you to tell me, I don't want you really to tell me about the problem. I know it's a problem because you wouldn't be sat with me talking otherwise, but tell me about your hopes and your hopes and your dreams for the future, and just tell us a little bit about what you're doing, because I mean, you are an amazing example of what you can go on to achieve. So tell us what you're up to.
I think the main thing for me, Claire, is I mean, I took heroin from 15, and I'd been clever at school and wounded up a heroin addict. So I always found it so shameful. I found my own existence so shameful, because I had a brain, and I had a brain that I knew that worked. And one of I always believed, which, when I first got into recovery, my sponsor said, "Oh, you're in denial. What are you talking about?" I knew it wasn't it. I knew what I was doing wasn't it. I've not resigned myself to a life of heroin addiction. And when I was in my addiction, I started my A-levels 8 times, because I thought if I can just get my A-levels, then I'll be all right. Failed them 8 times. I will get to the first handing of essays, and I've not scored. Or whatever, all the reasons, all the reasons. So the very first thing I did, I was actually still on my Subutex. I was on Subutex for a year. I went to university. My first year at of recovery was on Subutex, and I actually went to university because education is massively, massively important to me. And I don't think there's ever been a time throughout a lot of my life where I've not been in education. I've not always managed to stay, because staying put at things wasn't my strong point, but I did start lots of things. And I think my kind of recovery journey, and I'm currently training to be a psychotherapist, so I'm at uni now doing that. And it was funny because my mum said to my kids the other week, she said, your mum has been to school the longest time out of anyone I know. And it's like, yeah, that's right. That's right. Because I just love it. I just love it. And I think, the more I know about myself, the more I can know about you, the more I can inform our staff team. And I think David's training as well. It's like we just seem to accidentally do everything together. And we're pretty much joined at the hip. So we're both at the same stage in the course. But what that's done for our organisation, because I think what's tough is, Claire, when we started this, I had a history. I was a barmaid because I could always get my hands on booze and money. So I was a barmaid, till I was about 25. Then I went into kind of like the care sector because I could work short shift, get shitloads of money, and no one could really see the problem that I was in. Couple of call centres. I mean, the one thing that was always apparent was I had the ability to lead, but I could never keep hold of it because I got pissed and I got sacked. Or I was rough and I got sacked. So when we kind of started this, I had no history of managing. I had no history of leading a team or, motivating people. And it was really, really tough. So I think my quest really has been to learn more about myself, because the more I can learn about myself, the more I can then know about you, the more I can then inform you. And I think it actually makes me a better leader, because then I'm much more aware of my team, and I'm much more aware of vulnerabilities, and I'm much more aware of conversation styles, and much more aware of strategies. Yeah, and it has benefited our organisation hugely. I mean, just some of the things that we've managed to implement supervision-wise, some of the different elements of groups, and there has just been a change of perspective. Now, I think what we like to create is an organisation where everyone can grow, because when people grow, the organisation grows as well. And I think in that growth, then things change. And we never know where the next changes are going to take place. But I think if we stay focused on, staff, individuals, training, and not just the stuff that's work related, we've sent people on retreats and all sorts of stuff, not to do with job. It's going to serve them well, which in turn, will serve us well. So,
yeah. No, I think it's great. I think it's lovely what you're doing. And I think, what you're doing is you're utilising that amazing brain that you were born with, and achieving your greatest potential. And I think for me personally, I know when I was in active addiction that I always thought I was frightened of failure. But what I learned once I got into recovery, it was actually fear of success that I was more frightened of, because I have been born like you with an amazing brain. Different. My brain's different to yours. I work differently. I'm very, very creative thinker. I'm not very analytical. I can do analytical. But I think that, that's our job, isn't it? We're put on this earth to find out who we really are and how knowing ourselves can help other people to achieve their greatest potential, whilst also helping ourselves as well to grow and learn and fill our head with just the amount of information that's out there that needs to be sort of distributed amongst our communities, And
there's no one more resourceful than a recovering, drug addict, heroin addict, or alcoholic. I mean, what it takes every day, to maintain that, the amount of characters you have to play, the amount of thinking you have to do about how you're getting your money, how you're getting from A to B, to what you're going to tell them, to, the level of juggling and the level of resilience and resourcefulness. If that can be channeled into something positive, it's like we met the best workforce.
We do. And you know what? We're natural. This is what I was doing before lockdown. I was running, as you know, I was running a community hub that was all about social innovation and about helping people, once they got into recovery and once it stabilised, to start their own business ideas or their own project ideas, or think about starting their own companies. I mean, we've had over 11 companies emerge. We've had about 10 projects emerge. And these are all from people who never really thought that, you know, oh, it's all right for them over there doing this. But I think the way our minds work are just phenomenal. And we do make amazing entrepreneurs. We make a great workforce, but we also make very good social entrepreneurs as well, because often we've got that passion and purpose already built in us. So,
and I think when the pandemic starting, you know, a group of ex-drug addicts and alcoholics go, well, where this shit, these roses. So, you know, after the initial shock, it's like, there's something good coming.
Yeah.
You know, because
Can I ask you, firstly, we've got a message from a guy who says, wow, that Kerrie is a good looking woman. And his name is Dave. Dave, somewhere. Do you know him?
There he is. Wow, that
that's my husband.
Yeah, and in conclusion, what does the future look like for the well communities now? What have you got planned for after the pandemic's over?
Okay, so the future looks like for us more housing. So we're just in a position where we are looking to replicate the model in Morecambe and in Kendal. So we're not far off that. I think to probably be involved with maybe one more hospital. So I think what we're looking for is the Morecambe Bay footprint, you see. So what we don't want to do is go really far afield where it's a watered down service, where we don't know the communities and where we'd struggle to galvanise communities. So I think what we're really looking to do is strengthen our footprint across Morecambe Bay, which is kind of Lancaster, Morecambe, you know, South Lakes, and, you know, some moving into central Lancashire. So I think, you know, Dave, you'd have to ask Dave that. He's got about 20,000 things up his sleeve. The way it works is Dave goes out and gets the work and I deliver it. So I suppose, Dave will have loads up his sleeve.
Maybe we should have Dave on at some point.
Yeah, absolutely.
I love Dave.
So I just want to say thank you, Kerrie. Thank you very much for coming on today. It's always a pleasure to talk to you. I think what you're doing up there is just brilliant. Especially in the difficult times we're in. So thank you very much, Kerrie.
Thanks a lot. I'll show it now.
And you know what? I just want to say from the bottom of my heart, thank you for not all that you do in the Morecambe area and the Lancashire area, but for all that you do. I mean, you've been so hospitable and so kind and so generous. And Dave's the same. You know, the amount of times I picked up the phone or sent a message going, can I have a chat, or can I ask you a question, or, you know, and I think that's such a beautiful quality of what you've got. You know, you've got huge hearts. It's not just a Morecambe Bay thing that you're doing. You've got a beautiful light, the two of you, and you just shine wherever you go. And you're willing to share that information with people. And I love you both dearly. I'd love for Dave to come on. I think the more information we can get out there, and the more hope that we can give people, the more that people can actually realise just what potential they've got too, you know, and that's what we're here for, isn't it? We're here to shine a light on other people's paths, you know, and I think you do a cracking job of that, Kerrie. So thank you so much for all that you do. And you're welcome. And Dave, I'll be in touch. You're definitely coming on. I'd love. Do you know what? I'd love to talk more about Leros as well, because I know the project that Dave's involved in helping people like you and I and Kev, who have got a heart to make a difference, who want to start these or have started these amazing recovery projects. How there's some synchronicity and some strategy and some support for one another, like you give to me, and you know, so I'd love to talk to Dave more about that.
And I think as well, you know, there is an invite to anyone really, you know, I mean, you can use that number for that reason as well, because I know early days when you're starting things, it's like, you know, there's questions and one thing or another, and I would have loved to have someone who I could ring and go, what do I do? What does that mean? What, you know, what's all that about? And they just weren't there. So, you know, I just extend that offer to anyone who just might want to ask questions and find out a little bit more.
Yeah, and that's how my project started, with setting up a social enterprise. I thought it was so difficult getting the support that I needed unless you had loads of money to pay for a coach. And I was like, well, I didn't have that sort of money. So the way I look at it is, when I'm gifted something, be it recovery or the knowledge of how to start a social enterprise, I give it away. It's like, well, I've learned it, you can have it too. So I love what you do, and I think you're an amazing young lady. And loved having you. So I look forward to speaking to you very soon, and definitely getting the lovely Dave on. Thank you so much, Kerrie. Lots of love. Have a lovely week.
Bye.
Bye.